Okay, we've got quite a few people here today with us. I want to thank you for being here today. My name is Diane Passy, and I am one of the counselors at the Employee Assistance Program. And today we're going to be talking about a supervisor's guide during stressful times. So our facilitator for this is Addie Heap, and you can see her there as one of the participants. If you have a question during the presentation, you can unmute and ask, or you can use the chat feature at the bottom of the WebEx. If you hover your mouse over the bottom part of your screen, you'll see a chat bubble. You can click on that, and then to the right-hand side, you can choose the person you chat to. So you can chat with Addie to be able to ask any questions that you'd like. So I'd like to welcome you to this presentation, which will help supervisors be able to support their caregivers during times of its stress, which we are experiencing right now. So I do want to point out the phone numbers for the Employee Assistance Program. We've got a local number and an 800 number. Please call those numbers if you have any questions that you may have regarding a caregiver for yourself. We do a lot of supervisor consultations. It's something we really like to do to help you with a difficult situation. You don't have to go it alone. You can talk to us about the best way to proceed. And we also help with your individual stress that you may be having, or any work stress and other issues. We also will see your partner and your family, your children up to age 26. We do find that even though we are a work-related resource, the number one issue that we talk to people about is family and family issues. And they are very abundant at these times as we're trying to manage being isolated and being quarantined and some of the unknowns that we're experiencing. So don't forget to call the EAP. We have, during business hours, we have one of our counselors on call we're on call 24/7, but we have a counselor manning the phone during business hours. And then afterwards, we have a crisis service that can help as well. And so please feel free to call us. We also want to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen that talks about anybody having thoughts of self-harm or suicide. Please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There's the phone number there. It actually, even though it's a national number, it is manned or staffed by people who are local. And so you'll get a phone call, or it'll be answered by someone locally. And you can get crisis support, community resources, and referrals. All right, so let's go ahead and do an overview. We're going to first talk about recognizing signs of anxiety and stress that kind of persist, that don't go away, and then how you can support caregivers through something called psychological first aid, and then a self-compassion piece, which is a calming piece that can help. So let's talk about the initial signs of an acute stress response. So when something is very acute, you're going to get fight, flight, or freeze. And that's very common. Every human being has that. If the acute stress is lasting longer and longer, what you're going to see is a change in normal functioning. And so in the fight response, you might see a caregiver that's more aggressive or loud than usual. They could be in a hyperarousal at that point. A flight response would be someone that's more withdrawn than usual. And a freeze response would be somebody with an inability to act, more problematic than usual. And so you want to watch for a change from normal functioning and just pay attention to your caregivers and see what's going on. Okay, so let's continue with some of the signs. I'm going to start at 11 o'clock on this graph, and I'm going to go counterclockwise around. So the first one is loss of enjoyment in activities. If you hear people talking and they're just like, yeah, I just don't want to do things like I did anymore. We're hearing that a lot as people have been quarantined and also facing risks. And so we're seeing a lot of that. The body responds by having headaches. Another number one sign, actually there are two number one signs. One is the loss of enjoyment. And then the number two thing that I've heard reported is difficulty sleeping or relaxing. So a lot of sleep problems. And if you're not sleeping well, that's going to lead to difficulty concentrating, lack of focus. Also, the worry and anxiety can cause a lack of focus. Then there's an obsession and ruminating, very, very common for us to get up into our heads and have the hamster wheel just turn, 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 turn. We get some appetite changes. Sometimes people are eating more than usual to try to get that dopamine response and that serotonin response in the body by, carbs and sugars and things. And then there are some people that their stomach is so tense they can't eat at all. And so we get both ends of the spectrum there. Also feeling guilty, not able to help, not being sick when others are. Just lots of reasons why someone may feel guilty. We do see neglected hygiene, people coming in without the proper care that they have before. Of course, one of the caveats to this would be, we've all got COVID hair because our salons are not open. So as they start to open, you should see people starting to feel and look a little bit better. But if that persists, then that could be an indication that somebody's having a rough time. Also, inability to seek help. People sometimes think that, well, my issue is not important, so I can't really go talk to somebody. But then they suffer in silence, and we don't want that to happen either. Persistent feelings of nervousness, worry, or sadness, it can kind of linger and not go away, and that can be problematic. Irritability, we're going to see this a lot. Shorter temper than usual, other mood changes. You might see some euphoria. People on their days off, they go and do an activity that's really grandiose, big, and then they come and really talk about it. So these mood swings start to appear. Restlessness or jumpiness, very common because of the heightened chemicals that are in our body because of a prolonged anxiety response. Talk of a foreshortened future. My job's at stake. Society is, what are we going to do? It's never going to be the same. Those types of things. And then we start to see some unhealthy coping strategies, increased substance use and withdrawing. Now, those can actually be very good coping strategies. Some people are finding themselves, alcohol works. It gives you a sense of calm. Being by yourself works because you can gather your thoughts. But if it gets to unhealthy levels, then that's where the concern needs to be drawn. So one of the ways that you might know that your caregivers are having some increased substance use, they might be having on their Monday, whatever their Monday is, there'll be a tardy or they call in a lot on the Monday. And it's because on their weekend, they may have been overindulging in some substances. So what do we want to do? How can we help? One of the most important things is communication. And you want to communicate frequently and clearly. Without frequent updates, people will create their own stories. And a lot of times those stories are negative because our brain does have a negative bias. And so it's really common for that to happen. So if you have an update, say, here's what I know. But if you haven't communicated in a while, go ahead and communicate anyway. Perhaps your message is, I don't have an update now, and when I do, I'll provide it as soon as I can get it. You're wanting to create safety for your caregivers. You want them to know that you are a source of information. So even if you don't have an update, let them know that. And then invite them to contact you if they have any concerns so that you keep those levels of communication flowing. And remember that people will create their own stories, so you want to add to the narrative, which would be a working narrative. All right, now the next thing you can do is to listen. And as supervisor, sometimes you're charged with fixing things, but listening can be the very best tool that you have. So a simple way to do that is to reflect back what the other person is saying or what they're feeling. Now, I have a lot of people think, oh, isn't that patronizing if I just repeat back to the person? And it's not. It's actually quite validating. So here's an example here. They say, I'm stressed and don't know what to do. You repeat back, you're stressed and worried. Tell me more. And so you've acknowledged their feeling. And when that has happened for you at any time, you appreciated it. And so it really is beneficial now. I was working with a group that had to deliver a difficult message, which some of you may be in that situation. And so they would go to deliver the message and the receiver would say, I don't want to hear what you have to tell me. Well, if you respond by saying, I'm giving you the message and that's what needs to happen, you're already having a fight. So one of the best things to do is just to repeat back what the person said. So if they say, I don't want to hear what you have to tell me, then you say, you're having a difficult time hearing my message. And that simple reflection back, the person will say yes and this, and then you reflect back what they say after that. So just repeating back the same words, the person will feel validated. And then it could move, it has a better chance of moving into a resolution discussion. So even though you think it may be simple, or you think, or you've heard that it might be patronizing, try it and then see how it works. So then you also need to resist the urge to fix it, because there's some of the stuff right now we just can't fix. And people need to be heard and they want to be heard. So confirm you heard them, reinforce that you're on the same team, and then if possible, look for solutions together. And in the very least, you can resort to my favorite statement of all, which is, we're better together than we are apart. We are better together than we are apart. So let's be a team as we go forward. When you're checking in with struggling caregivers, we've given you a couple of examples of what to say, because sometimes people get a little frozen and don't know what to say. So here's a good opening. You seem to be distressed. Do you want to talk? Or another one might be, you don't seem to be your usual self lately. Can I help? Another simple is, what do you need? And then also a reminder to connect to others. What support do you have? In any of these conversations that you have with someone, you want to validate and legitimize their fear. You're right, this is scary and unusual. It's normal to be afraid. We're all afraid. We'll get through this together. So there are some sentences that you can use as you're tackling this with your employees. Then we want to offer some encouragement. Part of a supervisor's responsibility is to instill hope in their caregivers. And there's 3 different ways that you can instill hope. The first one is to encourage action, even if it's a small action. So you could ask, what areas in your life do you have control of? And then a person can start thinking, oh, well, I can control this, I can control that. And most people do visibly calm down when they recognize they have control. And then what positive steps can you make for your well-being right now? And it's been proven that small steps of doing anything you do, a step that you take, actually starts to alleviate that anxiety, because it takes away the frozen state. And so encouraging small steps, small action can be very helpful. Also, you want to encourage connection to other people, to pets, any place that a person can get a connection. Also encourage self-compassion through self-care, meditation, and other forms. And I'm going to talk about self-compassion at the end here with a little example. Also, I want to remind you that you have a gut, follow your gut. You're probably right more often than you're not. And if there's any time that you're wondering if a caregiver is having thoughts of self-harm, follow these steps. First, you can ask, you seem to be struggling more than usual. Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? And research has shown that if you go ahead and say the words as bluntly as that can actually cause a calming effect on the other person if they're having those thoughts. So don't be afraid to say it. If the person says no, then you remember your gut told you something, so they could say no. But you want to follow up with, well, if you were, could you tell me or someone that you trust? You want to give them the next step, because sometimes when people are in the mindset of wanting to hurt themselves or that they need a next step. So you're giving that to them. Can you connect with me or someone else? If they say yes at that point, then you call us. Call the EAP. There's our phone number. Ask to speak to a crisis worker, crisis counselor, and that phone call will be answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's important to note that if a person is suicidal, they do need to be assessed and assured that they will be safe. And that's what we do. That's what we're trained to do. So please call us and we can help you with that. If the person is at home, you could call the police to request a welfare check. If you want to call us first and say, this is what I want to do, what do you think? We can talk you through that. But a person does need to be assessed if there's any hint that there's suicidal ideation. All right, now I want to talk to you about something called psychological first aid. Often managers don't trust their own ability to connect and support caregivers with acute stress. Psychological first aid breaks this down into very important but simple steps. So the first one is to adopt a non-anxious presence. You want to show up calm and confident. If you show up nervous and scared, the person on the other side is going to wonder what's going on. So you need to adopt a non-anxious presence as you approach your caregiver. And then you listen. And this, we've talked about listening. Here's a reiteration. Tell me what's going on. You want to slow down. Don't interrupt. Don't ask too many questions. Just let them talk. And then you want to convey compassion. Sounds really hard. This is really hard. And you don't want to smother it over by saying at least. So a person says, I'm really scared. You don't want to say, well, at least you're still working, or something of that nature, because that takes it away. So convey compassion. This is tough. It's hard to do what we've been asked to do. And then assess their work needs. Some people consider, you want to consider options such as a day off, switching shift, or some help with some job functions. Sometimes that's all the person needs. And then you want to assess physical needs. Does a person need a nap, a ride home, childcare, meals, laundry? And you just ask about those things. Then we want to do that encouragement of connection again. And some of the people to connect to are coworkers, family, friends, and clergy. So ask your caregiver, who can you talk to later today? And remember, pets are in this category as well. Who can you connect with? Can you connect with your pet? Then help them connect to their personal values. What's the most important thing in your life right now? For me, it's my family. I think most of you would say that as well. You would say, my family. Yeah. And as soon as a person says my family, then they will start to reflect on their family, and that's going to remind them of their values. And then you can ask, what gives you the strength to carry on? And some people will say my conviction, or my work ethic, or whatever it is. Let a person say it, and then you praise that and you talk about how important that is. If needs be, you connect them with mental health professionals. Would you like to call the EAP together? Give the phone call, and then promise to leave the room so that they can have that conversation in private. And you want to protect from future harm. What can I do to help you feel safe right now? And if your gut tells you to, again, that to ask them if they want to hurt themselves and call the EAP. Now I want to talk about the concept of self-compassion. This comes from Kristen Neff, PhD, and she said that people who increase their self-compassion, they start to talk about their mistakes with kindness to self rather than self-condemnation. We all know this, but many times we don't practice it. So how do we do that? And she has 3 components of self-compassion. The first one is self-kindness versus self-judgment. You want to be warm and understanding to yourself when you fail. Many of us beat ourselves up in our own mind. We beat ourselves up worse than we ever would a friend or even an enemy. So turn that compassion inward and talk to yourself in a more compassionate way. You could start with, gosh, I messed up. Wow. I feel bad. And then give yourself compassion. Guess I was having a rough day. Then go to the next step, common humanity. Instead of isolating, remember that we all fail. Be vulnerable and imperfect. Don't be afraid to share that part of you. We're all in this together. And then the last one is a mindfulness piece. Mindfulness means to pay attention to multiple things that are happening at once, allowing the experience to happen, not judging it, and then not overreacting to those negative feelings, taking a more balanced approach to all of the feelings that you have. So rather than identifying with the negativity or the sadness or the anger, you say, wow, I am feeling that right now, and I also have other emotions, and this will pass. So those are the 3 main components of self-compassion. Then Dr. Neff talks about when suffering is involved, then she talks about these 3 sentences to say to yourself. So when suffering, try increasing your self-compassion by saying these sentences. This is a moment of suffering. and just stop for a minute. And when you see that, you're acknowledging the suffering. You're acknowledging that it's hard, but you're also acknowledging that it's a moment, which alludes to the fact that it may shift. And then you say suffering is a part of the human experience. We all suffer. That's what makes us human. And that suffering can bind us together and can create bonds of compassion. And the next one, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And you're eliciting those kind thoughts and self-compassion that need to be there to help you through the suffering. The best way to teach this is by modeling it as a supervisor. So try your best to do these things. So once again, I want to put the phone numbers for the EAP and the National Suicide Hotline on the screen for you. You can take a picture of that if you'd like to. And we will make these slides available to you. I believe they were sent out with the WebEx invitation. And at this moment, I'd just like to open up a forum if anybody has any questions, or Addie, if you had any questions come in. Do we have anybody have any questions at this point?
Somebody was asking about the slides, and they should be attached to the calendar appointment. So if you just open that up, there should be slides and I believe a handout.
Okay, here's a question. What do I tell a caregiver who is very concerned about going home to their family and facing their family when their family says, is wondering why they're doing this? That's a really great question. And so first of all, acknowledging for that person that it's a fearful thing, acknowledging that that their fear is legitimate, and then reminding them that they are taking safety precautions, and review the safety precautions that are being done. And then tell them to go home, and when they talk to their family, to talk about those safety precautions that are being done. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, I want to thank you for being here today. And if you do have any other questions, please feel free to call the Employee Assistance Program. Thank you so much.